Hello, everybody, and welcome into the Casual Sports Podcast. As always, I'm Alec Caberna. That's Mike Wolfgang, and this is the Casual Sports Podcast. Mike, Hall of Fame game last night, which means season finally back. We're underway. We're getting things going. Feels good, doesn't it?
It does feel good. It does. I didn't get a chance to watch last night, so I didn't really get that whole feel that it's back. But I know you were watching most of it, so.
I did watch actually the whole thing. Part of me, you stop paying attention at some point because it is just, fourth and fifth stringers at some points. But I thought there were some key moments last night for both of these teams that I think are going to translate towards the season. Obviously, it's preseason. You don't want to overreact to anything you see in preseason or training camps. At the end of the day, these mean nothing towards the regular season. Browns, they went 4-0 in the preseason, then had an 0-16 season. So same thing happened to the Detroit Lions when they went 0-16 as well. So don't rely just because you have a good preseason that it's going to translate over. But I loved McDaniels getting the win next to his high school. I kept mentioning it on the broadcast. It was really cool to see all that. And a couple takeaways I had from the game. The Jaguars' offensive line, they looked bad. And they only allowed one sack. But when you saw the way Jacksonville was running the football, they don't have bad running backs. I mean, their best guys weren't playing, but Mekhi Sargent and Nathan Cottrell got a bulk of the carries. They didn't run the ball a lot. They were trying to, I think, work more with a lot of the young wide receivers for this Jacksonville team. They overall didn't have a ton of possession in this game. It was dominated majorly by the Raiders. Jacksonville only had 25 minutes of possession compared to 34 for the Raiders. 10 minutes is a big difference when you're talking in a game of football. But I thought the offensive line for this Jacksonville team looked bad at a lot of times. They weren't able to open holes against the second unit of this Raiders team. And in Jacksonville, they were putting their better players in the game, not their starters, all of them, but they were having a lot of their better players in the game going up against the second units of the Raiders. Raiders barely had any starters. I think 30 players were out for Jacksonville in total, so they did have a good amount of their starters gone. So take this game with a grain of salt. But from what I saw, at least to start, I'm not confident James Robinson and Travis Etienne are going to have a great year behind this offensive line. I think they're a better pass protection team, which I think the direction this team is going to try and go this year, even though they probably should be a more run-balanced squad. And I got to take back what I said about the wide receiver core in the Raiders not having any depth. From what I saw last night, this is an amazing wide receiver core. Granted, second units going up against backup, third-string corners and defensive backs, but when you watch this game and the catches that were being made by this core, I mean, there were some great toe taps on the sidelines. They were finding every hole in the defense, slicing it up. And I think when you mix average wide receivers with, Josh Daniels' offensive scheme that he utilized in with the Patriots, and they're always having a lack of offensive weapons at the wide receiver core, I think it really is playing to the talents of this core. And I think when you were looking around last night, and Keelan Cole had a 31-yard catch, Tyron Johnson had 39 yards on 2 catches. One of them came on 25. There were some drops, some misses here and there. It's going to happen when your starting quarterback isn't out there. But I thought overall, every time I was watching this game, the Raiders were making a drive. It was coming from great running backs. Offensive line looked great for the Raiders. And it came from wide receivers just absolutely burning defenders all night long in this game.
And you know what? That's balanced to have with the Raiders side of it too. We were hitting yesterday with when you're somewhat top heavy, we weren't familiar too much with their depth. Like you said, that showed last night. According to what you said and some things I've read, because I did not have a chance to watch the game, but I think with Jacksonville, with the offensive line part of things, that's going to be, when your team last year had a bad year, yesterday we're talking about some pieces they brought in, maybe they can win 6-7, maybe get around that win total that they're projected to be at. That's not going to get you very far when you have an offensive line that, number one, like you said, they only allowed one sack, but it's more than just protecting the quarterback. You got to do that and create, holes for running backs, create, opportunities for the quarterback to find people open. Slaughter last night, the quarterback, he didn't play too bad for him being a backup playing in this game. 1 touchdown, he had 13 of 25 and 127 yards. It's pretty good. And, for a backup who's not playing the whole game in a preseason game, that's, you take that, that's not what you want the quarterbacks. It's probably going to be, it's going to be Trevor Lawrence, but that's something you got to, that's something you have to, it's important in national football to establish your backup quarterback. These are the type of games to figure that out.
It is. And I mean, I liked Loughton a lot in that game last night. He was pretty good at game managing, but I think a big part of it, every time he had to try and make a pass downfield rather than a short route, he was under duress immediately. He had to scramble out of the pocket. He was almost always rolling out because the entire line kept collapsing from the second unit of the Raiders. It wasn't even their, best rushers and like Max Crosby. It wasn't those guys. It was just the regular defensive members of this Vegas Raiders team. And I think that really impacted Jake going into this game. Slaughter, a little bit more experience for him. I think he was able to kind of handle that well. And you see the sack. It's because he was staying in the pocket, accepting that pressure and looking to push it downfield while Loughton was, rolling out of the pocket, looking downfield, and ultimately having to throw it out on a lot of those moves. But Slaughter, more of a pocket passer type player, and that's why he got that one sack. That's why that fell onto him, is because he wasn't able to avoid the pressure. And I do got to give some props to Jacksonville's defense in this game. Obviously, 27 points isn't great. Their defensive backs are terrible. But I got to say, I think the defensive line, for what they put out there, was average. They maybe a little above average. They put their first overall pick out there on the line. And I believe it's Trey Walker? Yeah, Trayvon Walker. He got put out there. My one thought from Trayvon Walker in that game, he looked small. And that's not what you want out of a first overall pick that you're putting as your edge rusher. He was an interior defensive tackle at Georgia. Now he's playing on the outside. He looks really small going up against a left tackle. And that was a concern I had in that game. Every time I saw him trying to get past the linemen, he didn't really have anywhere to go. He couldn't get past them. The size just didn't seem to match up well, I think, in a big majority of this game for him. So I think that's a concern for Trayvon Walker going into this season. You got to watch for that size. And the one sack he did get was, I believe, when it was Stidham at the quarterback spot, stepped up in the pocket, and it looked like he was about to go off for a scramble, and it kind of allowed Walker just to kind of slip off to the left side of the linemen and grab him up. And even then, Trayvon Walker was on the ground trying to pull Stidham backwards. Stidham was standing there. I mean, he was leaning a little bit, and they ended up blowing it dead just because he was protecting the ball. He wasn't looking to throw it. But I think there's some serious development issues going on with Trayvon Walker. At this point, in going into preseason, this guy should have been completely beefed up in an NFL system. I think this falls back to Jacksonville, not necessarily him either. When you got a number 1 overall pick who was a beast in college, you have to find a way to translate that. The last couple of guys we've seen, especially out of big-name schools like Ohio State, I mean, they were putting guys out there that were day one ready. And this, I think, is one of those first times. That first pick, this D-end, I don't think he's day one ready.
Well, you're sticking on the defensive side of it too. I'm looking at what you said with the offensive line of Jaguars, because you're going to be facing pass rushers. You're going to luck out with week 1 because Chase Young's not going to be back till a couple weeks into the year. So you're going to luck out with week 1 against Washington. But looking down the list, you got to play the Chargers who are pretty good up front. You got the Eagles who are normally pretty good up front. You got some other games that we're running through the schedule. We didn't keep this in mind yesterday either. That you got to play the Raiders again in the regular season. That's another team that has with Max Crosby and the guys they have. Ravens normally have a good up front. They're normally solid on defense, but not great. They're usually pretty solid. You got to face Dallas later in the year with Micah Parsons. So offensive line, like you said, I know it's preseason. A lot of the guys weren't in there, but that's something to look at with them. That when you have a young quarterback too, and a young backfield, and a young team in general, but you got to have some type of balance there on the offensive line. It's going to be questionable. You have to grow through these things too, but that's not. You're facing some tough teams there in the regular season when you have that type of an issue.
Yeah, you are. And I know Jacksonville was getting some sacks in this games, and you got to give them a little bit of props for that. I mean, what, 4 sacks in total, or 5 sacks in total, negative 41 yards to come out of it. When they got to the quarterback, they got there, but I don't feel like it was consistent pressure. I mean, you look at these completion percentages. I mean, Jarrett Stidham, yeah, he was down at just over 50%. He didn't have the best of throws. He got sacked 3 times. Pressure was getting on to him. But you look at Nick Mullins, 8 of 11 for Nick Mullins, 72 yards for him. Chase Garbers came in, 4 of 6. Jarrett Stidham struggled a little bit. He was more, hand the football off style. But I thought overall, this Raiders team looked really physical, really dominant. And in that first half especially, I thought Jarrett Stidham looked really good at quarterback. And we got a hot take here. Jarrett Stidham should start over Derek Carr. No. Just no. I like Stidham. He's a good backup quarterback. He understands the system. That's why he was brought in. He was not brought in to replace Derek Carr. He was brought in because he knows Josh Daniels' offensive scheme, because he's run it the last couple of years, or last, 15 years now, or 10 years in New England. So, no. Just no. Jarrett Stidham will not be starting over Derek Carr. That's not going to happen.
Derek Carr's the reason why Davante Adams is there.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that was a big focal point of last night as well when they were talking on the sidelines to Derek Carr and Davante Adams, just the chemistry those guys have from going back at it in college at Fresno State, winning the Mountain West Championship. Those two guys, I mean, they got some serious chemistry. They work every year in the offseason until Derek Carr moved to Vegas instead of being up there in Oakland or Los Angeles, a couple of the moves that the team made. But they worked out together. Davante Adams, a Raiders fan at birth. I mean, his family's got a freaking Raiders man cave in their basement. So, clearly this was the place Davante was meant to go. And he said one of the biggest reasons he left Green Bay was he just didn't know how much longer Aaron Rodgers was going to play quarterback, especially after we heard earlier in the offseason that Rodgers has been contemplating retirement. He's 39 years old. He's going to be going into his 40s. He just came out and said in the last 24 hours that he will not be playing until 45 like Tom Brady. That's not one of his goals. He's been contemplating retirement, and he feels his time is coming to an end here in the NFL. So I think it's a very real possibility this is the final season of Aaron Rodgers in the NFL.
Possibly. And it's hard to see,
especially with Green Bay entering into a rebuilding phase.
Yeah, slowly. I still think they could be pretty good this year, but not.
But once Rodgers goes, I think it's official. They will go boom like that.
Oh, for sure. But
Rodgers
I still
is the final piece.
They'd probably win the division this year because the division's not good.
Right.
And they still have Aaron Rodgers. And they still have some balance, but when you lose Davante Adams, that matters. But, nobody can
still have A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones, 2 beasts of backs. So,
and nobody's Tom Brady. I think we all know that. Like, Aaron Rodgers can try to do it.
Fewer than 10 players have played at the age of 45, and Tom Brady is going to be one of them as soon as he takes that first snap to start out the season.
I think you're going to start seeing players attempt to do it, especially quarterbacks, but it's not going to work. It's just not going to work. You can see him being at that level, but it's just everybody's different, and Tom Brady's different. Not everybody can play at that level.
He's an animal.
I'd like to see Aaron Rodgers stick around, but it's just not Tom Brady. It's not everybody can do that.
Tom Brady's not an animal. He's a freaking machine, and he's well-oiled, man, maintained, and I swear he doesn't look like he's playing at 45.
He does all the dirty work. He gets, car terms. He gets his oil changed. He does everything to keep his body right. He does all the little things, and again, now he's saying he said a couple years ago. Remember, I think it was the first year we started the show. He wanted to play until 45. He's 45. When's he going to stop now?
I don't think Tom Brady's going to stop until his legs finally give out.
Yeah.
I think that's what's going to give out with the way he maintains his arm and the rest of his body. It's got to be his legs that go first. I mean, you can only play so old. I don't understand it. I mean, my parents are a little bit older than him, but I couldn't imagine them going back 10 years and being half as athletic as Tom Brady still is now. It's not something that makes sense for normal athletes. I mean, we even see basketball players at 45. They look like they're in their early, late 50s. I mean, the fact that Tom Brady, he still looks pretty good too for being his age, especially when you compare to how old Adam Vinatieri looked at this point a couple of years ago. I think Vinatieri was playing at 44 or 45 years old, and dude was fully graded. Tom Brady's still out here. He's got to be getting highlights or something done to his hair.
Well, yeah, I mean, you see Vinatieri when he's playing, had a gray beard. I mean, when do we see Tom Brady? This guy literally keeps.
He's got to be dyeing it. There's no way he ain't more gray.
Oh yeah, come on.
He's using that Just for Men's touch of gray. That's what he's doing.
Just age natural. You don't need that crap. Nobody needs that. But no, yeah, I don't know. Nobody can do what he does. It's not. I'd like to see Aaron Rodgers play that long. I'd like to see some of these other guys play this long. But it's just not. It's not going to happen. It's only nobody's ever done it before. So why do you think just because one guy does it, it's going to happen now?
Right. How about this one? Aaron Rodgers getting 6 years left. I don't think so.
Yeah.
Now with his recent comments, like you were saying there, I like the thought of it, but I don't think that's realistic to see him last that much longer in this league, especially not with his comments and his recently announced drug use. So we won't get into that because I think there's some stuff brewing beyond that. So we'll see what ends up going on, but final thoughts from the game last night for me was Daniel Carlson, absolute freak, love him. He's already in midseason form. Hit a 55-yarder last night. Then I think he came out and hit another that was 40 plus. I think 3 for 3 on extra points. Looked freaking phenomenal in this game, and I loved what I saw out of him. And the other kicker on the other side, there was Elliott Fry, who hit a 46-yard field goal for Jacksonville. And then they had pulled out Ryan Santoso. Listen to this guy, 6'5", 258 out of Minnesota. And they pulled him out there. I think it was for a 60-yard field goal. He missed it wide right. But he had the distance. In my opinion, I think he could hit it from 65. I think that this dude could hit it enough to break the NFL record for the longest field goal. This dude's leg was phenomenal in terms of power. And I want to see him get some more shots. I mean, the miss definitely hurts, and Elliott Fry then making it after him, not a great look, especially we didn't get to see who was going to be their extra point kicker. But I think there's a legitimate battle here. The fact that they pulled Santoso out for a 60-yarder, I think kind of bodes to the confidence they feel with this guy and where they feel that his strength comes from. The long in his career was 35 in the 2021 season. That was his longest. And now they go pull him out there for one of the longest field goals. Well, obviously the longest field goal of the preseason.
I know you love your kickers too.
I do love kickers. How can you not love kickers, man? They make or break games sometimes.
I'm just saying, last year you were all over McPherson when he was on his run there. I think you have to think for kickers, I think.
How can you not, man? They're a special breed.
I mean, I'm not saying that's talent. I certainly can't kick 30-yard field goals. I mean,
yeah. Well, I mean, it's just you look at these guys, and I think it's so funny just to go back 10 years, especially down in college football. Some schools just had such terrible kickers, even the best of them. I mean, you look at Alabama, I think it was 10 years ago. Their kickers could barely hit it beyond 30 in college. And now you go look at college kickers, and even those guys are getting up near 50 yards. They're barely ever missing field goals. Now you're getting up here into the NFL, and we're seeing some beasts. We got kickers taken now in the 4th round last year with McPherson and Cincinnati, and you're seeing them play to 45 like Vinatieri. You're seeing them hit it from 60 plus. We're in an era of kicking, man, and I think it's a very big step for the NFL to take. It's such an offensive-oriented game, and if you can now, instead of having to punt from your 40 from the opposite 40-yard line, if I can kick a field goal and get 3 points, that's a win. Anytime you can get points on the board, that's a win in football. So if I can do that, hitting a 60-yard field goal, you're going to do that. That's what these teams are buying in for now, and I love it.
Well, I mean, and you always see game-winning drives throughout football history that end on field goals, but you're seeing a lot more the last 10-something years, especially in the playoffs too. You see,
defenses get so much better on their own side of the 50.
Yeah, and it won Tom Brady a Super Bowl. He won off that. But you're seeing a lot more the last 10, 15 years that kickers matter. And, a lot of these scores are, people talk about a lot of the scores. They're not like 14-7 scores anymore, just touchdowns. A lot of these scores contain a lot of field goals now that make weird scores that you
Look
really
at
don't
last
see.
night's game, 27-11.
Yeah.
I think it's
By the
a
way, how'd
prime
they get
example.
11?
The first 2 points in the preseason first 2 scores were both on field goals from Carlson.
How'd they get 11? They go for 2 on the touchdown?
Yeah, they went for 2 on the touchdown and got it.
It's not
that
really,
11 is a very odd score,
it.
but that's exactly to your point, though. Seeing those odd scores, it comes from those field goals.
Yeah, and when you're kicking a lot of them, a lot of teams, that's the strength of their team. They have great kickers that have been there a long time. Some teams can't find one. A lot of teams can't not have luck finding kickers. And
right.
My team's
look
been one of
how
them.
quick the turnover rate can be, too. If you miss 1 extra point, you're done in a lot of places. If you have any sort of struggles or you can't hit it from 50 plus, you're gone. These teams are looking for the best kickers out there. I mean, it is as tough of a competition as any other position. It might even be tougher, I think, than the quarterback spot to win a kicking job in the NFL.
And it's important too, like you said, but any chance to get, opportunity to put points on the board, that's always a win, because you see teams score touchdowns, go for extra point, miss it. And by the way, you see a lot of the last couple of years that actually hit the uprights. You normally didn't see that too much, even when we were younger, but you're seeing a lot the last couple of years. A lot of doinks, a lot of them deflect in, some don't. And even that 1 point matters. That even if it's early in the game, you talk about that with turnovers in basketball or errors in baseball, those or walks in baseball, anything like that. When you give other teams opportunities, a lot of times take advantage of it. So even 1 point missed field goal on an extra point, that matters. That could make or break games, playoff games, whatever the case may be with teams, whatever position they're in. But kickers are important. I'm not getting on you because you like kickers, because it is an important position. But I just know it seems like you have a thing for them.
Yeah, man, how can you not? But we actually got a question here, and I like this question. Is the longevity of these quarterbacks because they're so good or because there's not enough quarterbacks to replace them? And I think that's an interesting question, especially I think that question doesn't necessarily apply, I think, to Rodgers and Brady because they're still at the top of their – I mean, they're not at the top of their games now. Aaron Rodgers might be back-to-back MVP seasons. You're not going to replace that. But I think even with Tom Brady going as long as he is, his longevity is real, and he's having some of his best seasons statistically now that he's hit 40-plus years old. So I think with those two, I think it is that they are that good. But I think when you look elsewhere, when you look at some of the older quarterbacks, I'll go straight out here, Minnesota and Kirk Cousins. Is he really that good? No. But are they really going to find somebody that's better? I think he's good enough for what they have. They're not going out there looking for Super Bowls, it seems. They're not Super Bowl hunting. They're just trying to, I think, bide their time until Green Bay finally stutters, and that's when they're going to attack. And I think that time is coming that Green Bay is going to take a little bit of a step back. And I think that's when Minnesota is going to go in here and look for a quarterback. I mean, they've experimented. They drafted Kellen Mond, I think it was last year or 2 years ago, out of A&M. And he didn't really ever pan out in the preseason. I think he got some opportunities later in the year. Don't think he's really going to be enough to take that spot away. But, I mean, you look at San Francisco and Jimmy Garoppolo. He wasn't that good. They've been looking to replace them. They've been trying to, replace him for the last 4 years. They got Trey Lance. They finally put him in a spot they feel they're comfortable with moving on from Jimmy Garoppolo, and they've replaced him. So I think it's a very real conversation that some quarterbacks are not that good, but it's really hard to find a starting level quarterback in the NFL.
I don't know if I have an actual answer to this question. It might sound all over the place, but I think it's a thing where, it's a basic type answer, but a lot of quarterbacks just depends on what the system they're in. Tom Brady has been designed, even when he was younger, has been designed to be this good. Not that I'm not saying he doesn't have talent, but I'm saying he's found ways to be successful. He's found, even when he leaves New England, he's found somewhere else to go to be successful. But I think the thing is, when we determine if a quarterback's good or not, there's so many stats out there to determine, if a player's good. And this is for all sports too. The moment we think like, oh, this number's off, everybody wants to boot him out the door. Everybody's different in their own position. But I think with age too, it's like, I don't know. Like you said, I always say this too with head coaches, and I use this with Penn State with James Franklin. You've heard me say this how many times? Who are you going to get that's better than the head coach if you want to move on? Who are you going to get out there that's better? I like what you brought up with Kirk Cousins. Like, what is Minnesota really going to do? Because they're a team in a position where they're normally, around the 500 mark, the average.
And they could
team.
be in a wild card hunt too with this division as well. I think is a very important thing. The NFC not very strong. They even mentioned that in the NBC broadcast last night that the NFC, I mean, they might have the Super Bowl favorite in the Rams to repeat, which I don't like. I don't think.
But other than that, it's
repeating the NFL is really hard. But I think they even kind of pointed out it's going to be easy. I think for some teams to kind of make that jump and have a good season because there isn't a lot of competition throughout.
Yeah, and that's but like with Minnesota though, I mean, they're normally a 500 team fighting for a wild card spot. Sometimes like some years they've been able to get in, but if you move on from Kirk Cousins, you're in that middle range in the draft, first round, where you may not get somebody that's transcended. That's like somebody we look at like we thought Trevor Lawrence was going to be, which he still may end up being, but you're not going to get somebody that caliber that's young. And if you move on from guy like Kirk Cousins, just example, free agent quarterbacks is not always, I know we saw a lot this year because there was trades and stuff and people wanted out, but it's not always a huge mark for big name quarterbacks. What Tom Brady did a couple years ago, we don't see that often.
No.
So
Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be the big name shopped around this season. Obviously, Deshaun Watson got shopped around. We'll see what ends up happening with this whole situation with him. I'm looking forward to a Jacoby Brissett season, though. I like Brissett. Again, though, he's one of those guys. Is he going to be a quarterback because he's that good? No, he's going to be a quarterback because there's no one good enough to replace Jacoby Brissett at that quarterback position. And I think with how much the Browns just spent on Watson, I don't think they can now afford to trade for a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo, who, they were obviously in a conversation for during last year when the questions of Baker Mayfield popped up and comparisons to Garoppolo and all of that. But I think Cleveland is a real landing spot for Garoppolo. I just don't think it's a smart one with how much they've already spent at that position. And they have Brissett, who may be a step or two below Jimmy Garoppolo and obviously doesn't have the career success that Garoppolo has, but he's just another example of one of those quarterbacks. There just isn't anybody out there that I think you can trust to put a 3,000-yard season together right out of college. It's a really hard thing to do. And you get one or two guys, I think, every year from a quarterback class that can go and do it. So, I mean, you got 32 teams and, the same one of them's continuously buying at the top of that list. I mean, you're not going to get that spread going through the league very easily, getting a good quarterback at every team. I think to some extent, Russell Wilson is another example of this in the NFL. What has he done since 2013, 14? Those couple of good seasons there in the early 10s. He hasn't done much in the last 6, 7, 8 years for Seattle. They've been okay. They've been okay. He's especially the last couple of years. I mean, he had some fall offs. Now he gets moved to Denver and all this hype is created down there. But is he really one of those guys that you're buying in to get you a Super Bowl? I don't think so. I think there just isn't somebody out there that they're going to find to replace Russ that's going to give you his numbers. And that's all anybody cares about in the NFL at the quarterback spot. You got to put up numbers. They don't care if you look good. They don't care if you have a good spiral. If you can put together a 4,000-yard season, 2-to-1, 3-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio, you're going to have a job in the NFL at the starting quarterback spot. They want completion percentages over 70%. So long as you keep those numbers in that direction, you're going to have a job in the NFL for the most part. Some teams are going to be more willing to shop around, but I do think that there is just not enough replacements to go out there and get starting level quarterbacks out of college. It's really hard to do. It's really hard to find. And Joe Burrow is a rarity. I mean, 5 years in college, I think really helped his development, playing in two different systems at Ohio State and LSU, being on an absolutely loaded team, going up against the best of the best with LSU, playing in the SEC. I think it was a gauntlet for him. It's a hard quarterback spot because there's so many great defensive players in the SEC that I think it's a really hard spot for a quarterback to play. And that's why I think sometimes you do see some of those quarterbacks not coming out of Alabama and Ohio State that show out so well because they're playing some really great talent. But I don't know. That's my thought on the quarterback spot.
Well, I think the thing too, when you're talking about longevity, you obviously have to talk about injuries because that ties into how far your career can go. I know Tom Brady puts a lot of money in his body, just like LeBron does. But now we're starting to see LeBron get injured a little bit in basketball. Tom Brady really doesn't get injured. I know he has like some injuries, but he normally like this past offseason. It might have not been this one, but one of the off seasons he's been in Tampa, he had that knee surgery. The year they won the Super Bowl, yeah, played with the brace on, just kept playing. Some people could go through that stuff.
There's not as much movement though involved in that quarterback spot as it is.
That's true, and especially
NBA.
And especially in his system too, like I said, that's designed for him to be that good.
And he's designed to kind of be safe in that pocket. They really do bolster that offensive line, so he's not getting hit as much. And I know those hits are bad, but a lot of padding on to kind of protect the vitals. And I think one of the big things, we've seen LeBron get lower body injuries because in basketball, that lower body is so important. You're using it so much torque is put onto the lower half of your body that I think it wears on you, I think, a little bit more than football wears on that part, at least for quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Running backs, wide receivers, everywhere else. I mean, your lower body gets absolutely hammered and destroyed. And, we do see it sometimes with quarterbacks. I mean, that their legs can get destroyed. But I think a big thing with Tom Brady, he's been in a system for a long time, for 20 years now, that has been designed to keep his legs safe. And I think that's a big thing for him and why he's been able to make it this long. And I mean, with how well he's able to take care of his upper body, he doesn't have to worry as much about what's going on below the waist.
And I think that, it raises a question too, some quarterbacks that are probably some that are maybe at the tail end of their career now. There's some that just retired or have been retired. It kind of makes you wonder, like, if some guys were taking care of their bodies like Tom Brady did, or been in systems like Tom Brady was. I know not every team is the same, but like the one that crossed my head, I remember when Ben retired this past offseason, Colin Cowherd was saying, Ben was great. Nobody's saying he wasn't, but like if he would have taken care of his body a little bit better, I'm not saying he was a slob, but like he physically you could tell he wasn't as active as Tom Brady or as into stuff like that, taking care of their body, all of that in the offseason. That really wasn't Ben's style. It's people like him. You can imagine, like, if they actually did stuff like that, how much better they may or may not have been.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I do think it's kind of an important time right now before the start of the season to kind of go in and look at some of those quarterbacks that might be on their final leg now, or final, couple of feet here in their careers. And I think a big one to look at, Matthew Stafford finally wins his title. Now he's coming back. He's got some severe tendonitis going on. He's had some real struggles here in training camp trying to get healthy before the season. And every day it seems the reports are coming out, it's not looking good. He's 34 years old. I think it's something you have to remember. He spent a long time playing with the Lions. Back in 2009 was his rookie year. Matthew Stafford more than likely has 5 years left. Maybe. And I think that's something kind of crazy when you look at that, some of our biggest quarterbacks, 5 years is probably how much a lot of those guys have left, 5 or less. Even a guy like Kirk Cousins.
How many of those 5 years think are going to be good ones for Matt Stafford, though? Are you saying 5 good years or 5 years in general left?
I think 5 years in general. And I think 4 of them are good. Maybe 3 of them are good. And I think the last 2 are still better than average, but they're not his level.
Because he's out in LA. They've shown that they can put things around him.
Right. That's a big reason I don't think he's going to have that fall off. Kirk Cousins, he's 33 years old. So I think it's kind of funny that Kirk Cousins is younger than Stafford because it does not seem like it. But Cousins didn't start playing until 2012.
Yeah.
In the NFL, which just seems very odd. He was drafted by Washington to back up RG3. What a career Kirk Cousins has had.
I remember the RG3 days. It was short, but
it was fun, exciting.
When you talk about the longevity part of it too, and this is why Tom Brady's just so different because he's playing deep in the playoffs every single year. And it has not faced him. You see people that get in the playoffs for a couple years going deep runs, and it sets them back a couple years. Somebody like him, that's why he's different. It just doesn't set him back. And we talk about all the time. I know it's different. Actually, it's probably not different in football because the game's rough. It's physical. But with basketball, you're talking about going on deep runs, playing 6, 7, 8 months out of the year. If you're going deep runs like LeBron did for those 8 years in a row, it didn't take a toll on him either. That's why him and these type of athletes are different. But some people don't react to that. They just get on a couple runs and they're like, hey, it's just different now. My body's not feeling it.
Yeah, 100%. Speaking of quarterbacks and times coming to an end, at least with their former teams, story put out today here by Garrett Podol of CBS that there's rumors that both Saquon and Barkley and Daniel Jones are playing for their careers now with New York. Obviously bringing in Brian Daboll as the new head coach of the Giants. Saquon's going into his 5th year. Only had the one good season in his rookie year. It was a really great season. I mean, he led the NFL with 2,028 yards, 3rd most as a rookie in NFL history behind 2 Hall of Famers, 1 offensive rookie of the year. And he was really good, but we've seen injuries just continue to take a toll on him. He's going into his 5th season. Daniel Jones going now into his 4th season, I believe. So their contracts both end in this season. So Daboll doesn't have to keep them on here. I think they both might be kind of expensive to keep on too. I mean, when you look at this position, running backs keep getting paid more and more, and I don't think Saquon's going to be willing, at least with his injuries, to take a big pay cut. He's going to be looking for $30 million, around that, to stick around here. Maybe 15, 20 million. I'll put that down a little bit. That's quarterback numbers, but he's going to be looking upwards of $15 million going out into this offseason because of how his injuries have derailed his career so far. And you got Daniel Jones, who I think has been fine, but he's never had a system that he can flourish in. He doesn't have really any wide receivers in his career that he's been able to kind of build chemistry with. He's never had an offensive line that's consistent. He's never had a head coach stay around for more than a season. I mean, he's on his 4th head coach in 4 years now with New York, but is this not the same scenario we were just talking about with Baker Mayfield? And Baker Mayfield had better numbers than Daniel Jones, and Baker got shown the door. I think Daniel Jones is going to get shown the door as well. I think Daboll's going to be looking to build his own system here, build a new franchise, go out to the draft after this season and find his guys that he wants to build the future with. And I think when you look at the quarterback class coming out of college football this year, obviously 2 big headliners in C.J. Stroud and Bryce Young. And I know there's a lot of teams right now that are considering ways to get those guys on their team because of the way they've already shown out in their very limited time in college.
Yeah,
so I think it's the end of the line for Daniel Jones. Plus, you look at his numbers; he's only been above 3,000 yards once in his entire career. He's never been above 65% in completion. He's only been above 15. He's only been above 12 touchdowns in a season once.
And with them too,
he's been above 12 interceptions in his career once too.
I know there's always an answer of, who. Again, I'm going to go back to the thing of who you're going to get that's better, because right now you can get a lot of people better than Daniel Jones, but do they have the opportunity to? Most of the time with this team like them, they're probably not to find somebody to draft, like you said, Stroud or Bryce Young. They're not going to get somebody that's going to be, it's not a huge quarterback destination for New York. And I think, with Saquon, I'd actually love to see both these guys out of New York. I don't know how much Daniel Jones can do much better outside of New York, but I'd love to see a guy like, what's that?
I think there's teams that are willing to take on Daniel Jones.
A project type of thing, why not? Yeah, there's always somebody out there, and I think I'm not. You guys know my theory on Bus. I know some people throw it around with Saquon, but I want to see what he can do healthy. And we saw when he was healthy that his rookie year how he was good. You just ran through it all. I want to see. I wouldn't hate seeing him out of New York, because obviously that's a dysfunctional franchise most of the time. They don't really have great products on the field, at least offensive line wise, to help him out. That's what you need. We just talked about that with Jacksonville. I'd like to see him out of there too.
And I think there's 2 landing spots for him, and we'll see how the year progresses. And I think one of them, it's an odd one for sure, but I'm going to keep it in the same division. And I'm going with Washington, the Commanders, sending it over there. I mean, I think they're a team that could be looking for a young quarterback. The Wentz experiment, we'll see how that goes this season. But Carson Wentz, another one of those guys. He's out there because there might not be somebody better than him. He's 29 years old, but he finds ways to put up decent numbers. Only won 4,000-yard season. That was back in 2019. and his completion percentage has really tanked the last couple of seasons. You know, he was up there near 70% in 2018. It's gone down since then. Last season he had with the Eagles in 20 was 57%. That's why he got shown the door. 62% first year with the Colts. Now he's getting transferred over again. So clearly these teams aren't liking what he's seeing. So I think it does open the door, though, that Daniel Jones could get the move over there. I think another team in contention working with an old quarterback this season is Matt Ryan's new team, the Indianapolis Colts. They're definitely looking for a quarterback. And Matt Ryan is 37 years old. This is probably one of his last 2 seasons, I think, is what he's got. He's got great completion percentage, and last year was a big step up for where I think a lot of people thought he was going to be, but it wasn't anywhere near his previous seasons. It was the first time he hadn't had a 4,000-yard season since 2010. So I do think Matt Ryan's starting to come down. He was only off 4,000 by 32 yards, by the way. So got to put that out there. But touchdowns took a hit. Interceptions went up a little bit. Completion percentage went up a little bit, but passer rating went down. So I think Indianapolis is a good landing spot for Daniel Jones to go, especially because I don't think New York's going to keep him in division when you go for a trade like this. When you're sending a quarterback, you're not keeping him in the same division. That's just not something you do.
I actually thought of 2 other ones, too. These might not be as easy answers, but maybe a team like Tennessee. The thing's still out there with Ryan Tannehill. I know he got a contract and stuff, but at least I wouldn't even mind bringing Daniel Jones, if I'm a Tennessee fan, in as a backup, too. Because, we don't. Odds are, it's Ryan Tannehill. It's going to make you a good team, but he's not going to make you a really good contender. Maybe have him behind Ryan. And another team I thought of too, maybe Detroit.
I know they're in Detroit, but getting Goff there, at least for right now, I don't think they're going to look to make that move. I think they're still going to be building elsewhere.
That's the part of it too. I thought with Detroit, maybe why not? But the same thing is that I don't think Jared Goff's that guy either. But they showed last year that they like him, I guess, and they thought that they could be competitive with him. I think that's what you take as a Detroit fan, is just be competitive to start.
I think considering the fact they were willing to move Stafford for Goff means they want to kind of build around Goff and see what he can do with this team. They could have gotten other positions for a return for Stafford, and they went with Goff. So I think that's telling of what that team wants to do. So I'm gonna kind of close the door on that one. I don't hate it, but I don't think that's the direction I think they're going to go. Tannehill in Tennessee, it might not be the bad move. He is 34 years old. Daniel Jones could be at least looked at as a bench guy to sit behind him. Tannehill obviously getting older. Injuries are going to add up. We've seen it a couple times. I don't know who's Tennessee's backup quarterback right now.
Well, while you're looking it up, I did actually think of another one. Maybe Seattle. They were in the market for Baker Mayfield. They don't have Russell Wilson. They have Drew Lock now.
I'm only going to go no here because I've heard a lot that they're tanking for Bryce Young right now. Is the way I've heard.
That's true. Going. Yeah, I'm just like a current
Logan Woodside and Deshaun Kaiser.
There you go.
So obviously that's this season, but clear no backup in Tennessee. I think you could get a discounted price on Daniel Jones getting him out of New York.
There's a lot of possibilities.
Instead of behind Tannehill, who last season didn't have great numbers. He didn't have his running back there, and he completely fell apart.
And you know what, Alec, we say what you want about Baker. There were still teams in the mix for him this offseason. There's always going to be somebody in the mix for anybody that could be an experiment type of quarterback, just to be a backup, to see where things are. There's always a few teams out there. We just ran through a couple, and there might be even some teams that surprise you too that make moves, not just for Jones, I'm just saying, but to try to add to something to the quarterback room.
Yeah, my only thing is Baker was a better quarterback than Daniel Jones.
He was, yeah.
And Daniel Jones, I think clear as day right now, is not a starter in the NFL. He needs to be a backup, and I think Tennessee's a place that he could really go, and I think they could use him as a backup quarterback. I think he's going to become one of those guys you're going to see kind of get tossed around the league, kind of like Fitzpatrick. He's decent. He can come in, he can game manage, but he's not going to win you football games, and you're not going to build the season off of him. It's just not what he is, not who he is. And I think Saquon, now at 25 years old, going into his 5th season in the NFL, I think there's a chance he turns into a 2-back as well. I would love to see him be a starter in the NFL, but with the injuries at this point, I don't see it happening. The guy doesn't have 10, or pardon me, he hasn't had 10 touchdowns in a season since his rookie year. And a big part of that is injuries.
Yeah.
And I don't see teams taking the risk on Saquon anymore. Not when running backs, I don't want to say are a dime a dozen, but getting a guy that can run really well seem to be coming out of college at a higher rate these days than they used to. So I think Saquon's going to be looked at as a 2.
And, if I'm him, I take that, honestly.
Right. I mean, if you're him, you want to be a starter, but it probably isn't the reality of where he sits anymore.
And it's the best thing probably for his career. We just talked about yesterday with Zeke, too. I wouldn't even mind that being the case with him, too. Because, yeah, you're experienced. You had a great start to your season, but there's nothing wrong with that. You're still going to get a lot of carries. You're still going to get a lot of action. You're still going to contribute if you're on the right team to winning. So I don't think there's anything wrong with Saquon doing that. I actually probably would like that because like you said, I don't know how much money he's going to want. And if I were him, I wouldn't be wanting too much because I got to prove it again. I got to go out and prove it that I'm worth it. And, a lot of teams are out there probably hesitant to pay anybody, but especially a guy that's been hurt 3 out of his 4 years. Right.
Yeah, I think that's a big piece of it. But let's jump out of longevity, guys. NFL.com put out people they expect to make a big jump here in year 2. They're putting stuff out all week on it. They've got 4 positions put down here at the moment. 4 guys they expect to take a leap here. Number 1 in the running back class is Travis Etienne. I think that's a great look. He had a Liz Frank injury last year, missed the entire season. It didn't look like he was going to get any shots under Urban Meyer anyway. Another one, though, I think kind of interesting. Ramondre Stevenson with the New England Patriots. Damian Harris is their running back 1. Almost had a 1,000-yard season with 15 rushing touchdowns. But this is a guy that very easily can step in because Damian Harris is an injury-prone guy, much like, Saquon. So there's talk about him. Javonte Williams with the Denver Broncos sharing the backfield with Melvin Gordon. I like that, but I don't know how much he's going to be taking a second step. The dude had 903 rushing yards last year. I think they're expecting his touchdowns to go up now with Russell Wilson being the starting quarterback. That's the running back class they expect to take some jumps here, 3 of them.
Well, I'm actually glad you brought up the running back part because I just found on CBS's article that the top 10 actually running back rotations going into the year. A lot of ones actually just fell under what you were talking about, but number 10 is the guy that we keep talking about injuries with Saquon. They got the Panthers at 10 with McCaffrey and Chuba Hubbard and Dante Foreman. I thought that was kind of interesting to be in the top 10. I don't know. The guy's really good, but a guy that's normally always hurt like Saquon is.
Yeah, I don't know. I've always liked Chuba Hubbard since his time.
Oh, me too.
Back at Oklahoma State. Kind of a lackluster first season in 21 for him. I'm hoping for a big bounce back coming into this season. And I think the thing with the Panthers this year, I think the running back room is going to have a high rotation because I don't think they're going to use McCaffrey as much because I think they're going to try and save him for a postseason, for the postseason play. I think that's the way they're going to work this season. They know if they have high usage on McCaffrey early in the year, he's not going to be available. Even, come week 15, if they need to win some games down the stretch, he's not going to be there. So I think they're going to attempt to use him later in the year. And I think that does open the door for those two. Who else is on that besides Chuba? What was the other one? Dante Foreman?
Yeah, McCaffrey. Yeah, them 3.
Dante Foreman, another 500-yard guy last season. So, those two combined for 1,000. They're 1,100 actually. So, they got great ground production last year.
That's good balance between those 3 guys, too. I think that's kind of what you're saying.
If you can get 500 out of each of them, put together 1,500 rushing yards altogether, I think that's exactly where that team needs to be moving forward. So, I think it's an interesting move to kind of watch around there. But moving into wide receiver room, first one they put out there, Rashad Bateman with the Baltimore Ravens. Looks like he's going to be taking over wide receiver 1, as not much else is really there. Hollywood Brown's gone. So it looks like he's going to be the only guy really that Lamar Jackson's going to have as one of his big targets. They got Sammy Watkins on that team as well, so I think that'll help open the floor for him. Nico Collins with the Houston Texans. Part of me wants to say yes, but then again, he's also on the Texans. He can get a lot better than last year. 446 yards on 33 receptions and only a touchdown. I think him and Davis Mills can get a little better than that.
I like Davis Mills.
Right, yeah. I think we all did last season. But it's everything around Davis Mills and Nico Collins, so that we have problems with. Elijah Moore, though, with the New York Jets, and that's a definite yes. That guy needs to show up. I mean, from his production, what was it, an Ole Miss, now second year, working with Zach Wilson. He had injuries a little bit last season. He still had 538 yards. This guy could really have a big step this year. I'm excited to see what goes on with him. And Rondale Moore with Arizona was another guy they put on this list here. And I like it, especially now that Christian Kirk is gone. Hollywood Brown came onto the team, but I believe he was just arrested the other day for speeding.
I think so.
I believe so. I mean, he could face some kind of suspension or penalty. He was arrested for criminal speeding, actually. So he was going real quick. What was he? 126 in a 65-mile-an-hour zone. Yeah. How did he get caught? Jeez, man. What? Shit, man. That cop must have been flying behind him.
Right?
When I read 126, I'm like, man, going twice the speed limit. He got caught. I think.
What the heck was a cop? What the heck was the patrol guy going then?
I mean, yeah, that cop to catch up to that had to be going. I mean,
at least
obviously more than 126 to catch him.
Jeez.
Unless they must have pulled in a helicopter for that. Jeez.
Unless there was somebody way out in front where they just nabbed them. I don't know.
I mean, yeah, it could have been the speed trap scenario where one's already up there and he was getting on the highway going quick as here comes Hollywood. Woo! We're obviously not promoting speeding, but geez,
we all do it though.
We don't break the law here, Mike.
Right. Not that bad. I'm just saying.
Not like that. No, I mean 5 miles over is different than 65 over. But obviously a 6-game suspension also for D-Hop. There's a huge door right now for Rondale Moore to really kind of jump up into the conversation as one of their top wide receivers going into the season. He had some fun, flashy plays last year too, but he only had the one touchdown, only 435 yards. There's a big opening for some jumps overall for Rondale Moore going into this one. Last one on this list, Kadarius Toney with the Giants. I only say I don't know about this is because Daniel Jones is the quarterback and he's not the most accurate guy. So I think it's going to hurt Toney's numbers.
Well, since we're talking receivers, what do you think is the most balanced or your favorite wide receiving core throughout football?
Favorite wide receiving core in the NFL?
One you like a lot. I think deepest. I think you actually have to go
Bengals.
I was going to say that's probably deepest, or if not,
Boyd, Higgins, and Jamar.
Yeah, Hayden Hurst, tight end. Yeah,
that's a really good group.
I think that's probably the most talented.
Raiders are on the conversational list with Devontae and Renfro and Waller now. When I'm talking wide receiver core, I'm throwing tight ends in there. It's only fair.
You have to. They're used a lot. Yeah,
in conversations these days. I think those two definitely on the higher ends of the list. I'm sure there's others out there that I think we're bypassing a little bit here. I'm sure there's some.
There's some I think that if you're like looking not best, but up there in the conversation, up in the top 10. I like what the Eagles have this year with AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, and Rager and Dallas Goedert. I like that. And I like what the Bills have, too. Rager needs
to have a step up this season, though. He needs to get back to a TCU form.
He does, and part of that's too what Jalen Hurts does this year too.
Yeah,
with his progress, and I think one yesterday I liked one of the teams we talked about yesterday with the Buffalo Bills. You know, Diggs, you got Davis, Crowder, Dawson Knox, your tight end. I like that one. It's probably not the best, but it's a solid one. But it's probably top 10, I think.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of any others that I'm really like.
And Cole Beasley.
There's a lot of, I think, untested groups. I think you could really point it down towards even New York Jets.
Yeah.
I think when you look at the guys, Elijah Moore, Garrett Wilson, a lot of unproven wide receivers down in that core. I think that's one way to look at it. I don't know. Have the Rams set their wide receiver depth?
Yeah, I haven't pulled up
because
it is. Where was it? I just lost them. Oh yeah, Cooper Kupp, Allen Robinson, Van Jefferson, and Higbee tight end.
Okay. I think I do still like the Rams. Pretty much the same group they had last year, outside of Odell
and Allen Robinson
and Allen Robinson for that Super Bowl. But I don't know. I think it's a good enough group. I think that works for them.
Yeah, I like what the Chargers had too with Keenan Allen and Williams and Justice Guyton.
Yes.
I like Gerald Everett as tight end. I like that.
But I still don't say I can think anybody that has a better core right now than the Bengals. They're just
no. I'm just looking at
those four guys. Really, I mean, it's hard to find a better four than that.
Oh, I think though when Tampa Bay is healthy, they're in the conversation.
Yeah,
with Evans and Godwin and
Godwin just got injured.
Yeah, I mean because he'll be out probably half the year because I think got injured halfway through the year. I think he tore his ACL, but when I'm talking healthy though,
ACL today.
Was it today?
Yeah, it just happened again.
Oh, jeez.
Oh wait, hold on.
I know you had a knee injury like midway through the year last year.
Yeah, he had an ACL injury last year. I thought I saw something that he got injured again. Maybe
possibly.
Not.
Maybe training camp thing.
Going on the Twitter here real quick at the end of the show. It's always.
But when they are healthy, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and even just getting Julio Jones too, and Cameron Brate, even though they lose Gronkowski and Antonio Brown, whatever you want to say about him, and OJ Howard, I still think that's a good core when they're healthy. I think it's
Mike Evans, pardon me, is the one that got injured today.
Oh, what did he do?
Hamstring injury.
Sometimes that's a rough one.
Sometimes, but it can also just be a light strain and you're out a couple weeks and you're fine.
Yeah.
I mean, we have 5 weeks to the start of the regular season. Any minor injury is going to be fine by then. You miss preseason. And
no, backed off
Mike Evans preseason.
Yeah. But I think that's another one. Solid one when they're healthy.
Saints getting back Michael Thomas this year. I think that could be an interesting wide receiver room.
Good draft at it too.
Olave, Jarvis Landry is on that team. I forgot he got picked up by the Saints. They got Adam Troutman at tight end. Taysom Hill's the backup tight end. So probably the one spot where you have some question marks on it. But I think Jarvis, Thomas, and Olave, a decent group down there. They're just a step back because I don't think they have a great tight end at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm excited for that Saints team this year, though. I think they're going to be something. I like Jameis Winston back at it. But unfortunately, we're out of time here on the week. So, Mike, final thoughts here. Highlights of the week. I'm going football back, baby. I'm ready for it. Give me yours real quick.
Obviously, I'll go football back, but I got to go the home run when Neil Cruz hit the other night on the top of the outfield bar. That's just ridiculous.
That was pretty nice. That was a good one. Meathead of the week. I'm giving this one to Tony Dungy. He was on the pregame last night for Sunday Night Football on NBC is how they branded it. Dude's in the Hall of Fame, working at the Hall of Fame game, forgot to bring his gold jacket with him.
Come on, Tony.
They ended
He's
up
one of the great guys.
They said, "Oh, we found his jacket in like the second half of the pregame show or whatever," but he straight up forgot it. They had to borrow somebody else's or borrow an extra one. So I'm giving Meathead of the week to a Hall of Famer. I like that. A funny way to do it this week, but yeah, that's all the time we have time for. So I'm Alec Brennan. That's Mike Wolfgang. Power Hour coming up next on your Sports Network.